All right, hopefully you haven't gone crazy in quarantine yet. We are back for segment 3 of Public Health Merit Badge. Today we'll be covering requirements 3 and number 4. So we got a two-parter here. The assignment in Google Classroom will have the requirements listed as well, and also a few diagrams and a link to this video within it. So if you have any questions, you can reference those materials within the classroom itself. All right, so let's get started with requirement number 3, and it reads: discuss the importance of safe drinking water in terms of the spread of disease. Then demonstrate 2 ways for making water safe to drink that can be used while at camp. In your demonstration, explain how dishes and utensils should be washed, dried, and kept sanitary at home and in camp. All right, so the importance of safe drinking water, right? We all need water to survive. That's a given. You can go without food for a while, but you can't go without water for very long. So safe drinking water is critical. In most situations, you're probably in a campground that has an established drinking water location. In other cases, you might see some that have signs that do have water available, but it says non-potable, which means that it needs to be treated before you drink it. Okay, it can be used for washing hands and things like that, but provided you're using soap. But as far as drinking straight from the tap, that's what that sign means. Do not drink straight from it, or you could end up feeling a little bit sick. So a couple of things that you might run into with water, or as far as what's in water that can be potentially harmful to you. There are 3 items. The first of which is our protozoa. The 2 main ones are Giardia and Cryptosporidium. Both will make you feel pretty sick to your stomach. Can take up to a couple weeks before it actually affects you. So you want to make sure that you are drinking purified water. Even though that stream looks pretty clear and you can see down to the bottom and there's not a lot of sediment in it, doesn't mean that these organisms aren't in there. They're microscopic, so unless you're backpacking with a microscope, you won't be able to test the water for drinking it. So you want to make sure you go through a proper filtration system. The other items, the other 2, as we'll get smaller down the list here as far as these microscopic organisms are concerned. So protozoa being the largest, but still not visible to the naked eye. Bacteria usually affects you much faster, typically within a couple hours. You'll know if you have gotten some type of a bacterial infection from drinking contaminated water. And then the smallest of which are smaller than protozoa and bacteria, would be viruses. There aren't any standard off-the-shelf pumps that get rid of viruses. Those typically require chemical treatments in larger plants. But in North America, in the established first world as it's known, that's typically not a problem because our water treatment plants are separated and they're built to ensure that contaminated water through human feces and things like that don't reach our water supply. All right, so how do you filter water to drink? Right, you're on a camp out, you're on a backpacking trip. Can't carry all the water with you. We've tried that. It doesn't work. You always run out of water, and then you're playing water bottle roulette, trying to figure out what you're going to use the water that you have as far as food and things like that go. So you want to make sure you have a reliable water source, or at least the ability to go out and try to find a reliable water source while you're out. So the most common of which that we see in scouting and that we see with our troop is this. Okay, water purifier. It's a pump style, pulls water in, pumps water out. Now what's going on while you're pumping it in and out? It's pulling into the chamber, and there's a ceramic based filter that's inside here that actually, as the pressure builds up, when you push down on it, it forces the water through, and the ceramic style filter has tiny microscopic holes inside of it that water is allowed to pass through, but it catches all the other chemicals and things like that, and bacteria and virus, or not viruses, but bacteria and protozoa that are in the water. It traps them inside here. So these don't work indefinitely. They're usually good for, I want to say around the reading I saw, about 7,500 liters, which seems really high. So I'm going to double check that real quick because I think it might be closer to 750. Yeah, 750. So 750 before replacing the cartridge. Depending on how dirty the water is that you are filtering, they might need to be cleaned. A lot of sandy, silty type water, the stuff that's murky that you can't see through, that's going to build up on the outside of the filter inside, and it's going to make it harder to pump, and you might get water actually squirting out of the pump itself because it doesn't have anywhere to go because the filter itself is actually clogged. So make sure you're keeping an eye on that. Most filters have a pre-filter, if you will, which is a small mesh screen that gets rid of all the larger chunks of dirt and wood and other items that might be floating around in your water. But the ceramic filter that's inside here is typically which is the workhorse of the group and filters out all of the bad stuff that's going to make you sick. So that's probably the most common. A lot of the scouts in our troop are familiar with these. These are a lot of fun. We use these all the time when we're on backpacking trips, and other times when we're not on backpacking trips, just because it's a good experience to learn how they work. Another method, tried and true, pot, boiling water. Okay, start a fire, use your stove, fill the pot up, or whatever you're using to boil the water in. As a general rule, if you are under 6,500 feet of elevation, you need to have a rolling boil for 1 minute. Rolling boil is when the bubbles are actually coming to the surface and popping continuously. The little bubbles along the inside might be good to start throwing macaroni in if you're making macaroni and cheese, but it's not good to drink at that point. So you want to make sure you have a rolling boil going for at least 1 minute. If you're over 6,500 feet of elevation, so you're doing some backpacking up in the hills, going up to Whitney or Mount Pinos or anything like that, anything over 6,500 where you can't filter, or you don't have a filter and you're having to boil, it needs to be a 3 minute rolling boil. So 6,500 feet or below, 1 minute. 6,500 feet or above, 3 minutes, rolling boil. Has to keep moving. Water needs to be bubbling on the top for an extended period of time. The only downside with that is that now you have boiling hot water that you want to drink. And since we're not bringing ice cubes and things like that on campouts and backpacking trips especially, that can make it not quite as refreshing as you would expect drinking it straight out of a stream or a creek like you would get with the pump style filter. So that's another method. There's another one that's kind of similar to this contraption here, which is a water bottle or a bladder that then has a filter that gets inserted inside of it. So you fill up the bottle with your water from your water source, whatever that may be. You screw the filter in, and now it is safe to drink directly from the top. There are other styles that will attach to your Camelback or any other water bladders that you have, where it's an inline filter. So you have the Camelback on your back, you have the hose coming out that you would normally drink straight out of if it was clean water already. The filter would actually plug directly in to the input or the output coming out of the Camelback, and then you have another hose extension that comes out and into your mouth, and then as you draw the water through, it pulls it through the filter and makes the water clean for drinking. There are other ones that are even more bare bones than this. It's made by Life Straw and is actually called the Life Straw, which is simply just, it's a piece of plastic that has some activated carbon inside of it, and you would just put your head down into the water source and drink directly from that water source through the Life Straw. Good if you are in a situation where you just need water and don't have a way to store it. Bad in that you don't have a way to pull the water out and put it in a bottle, unless you're going to suck up a mouthful and then spit it into another water bottle, which I guess as long as you're the only one drinking it wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing. But in terms of large groups trying to purify water, that's a horrible method, and I do not recommend that. Okay, there's a disclaimer along the bottom. Do not use this for a troop-wide water purification method. Okay, good. All right. So then we need to discuss how dishes and utensils should be washed, dried, and kept sanitary in camp. We have a protocol within the troop that anybody that's ever been camping with us understands how it works. You're going to have 2 wash bins. One's for washing, one's for rinsing and sanitizing. You're going to use soap in the first one. You're going to have hot water in both. You're going to wash, get all the food off, everything else. Rinse it in hot water, get all the soap off and make sure it's clean that way. Then dry it off and then put it away. Okay, if you leave even a somewhat dry dish out on a table or in your camp chair, or just throw it in your tent, dust and dirt and everything else is going to be flying around. It's going to get on your plate or your cup, and then you're going to go to put food on it and you're going to eat it, and then it's not necessarily the water that's going to get you. It'll be whatever's in the dirt or the ground, things like that. So no 5-second rules while in camp. You want to make sure that everything that you're eating off of and drinking from are clean. So that means properly storing everything when it's done, not just leaving it outside for the elements and anything else to get to it. All right. Requirement number 4. Going away from water purification, it is explain what a vector is and how insects and rodents can be controlled in your home, in your community, and at camp. Tell why it is important. And in your discussion, explain which vectors can easily be controlled by individuals and which ones require long-term collective action. Okay, so a vector is any organism that can transfer an infection from one organism to another. So we'll use, let's use a tick, for example. So ticks typically like to hang out on animals, okay, wild animals. Your dogs can get them if they're out in tall fields kind of thing where ticks are prevalent. Deers are carriers for ticks. And what happens is ticks they're like mosquitoes, okay? They feed off of the blood of the animal that they're in. Only they're a lot larger and they're a lot more painful, and the bites last a lot longer than mosquito bites do, because they're actually burrowing their whole head in and chewing and sucking the blood out that method. They'll pull, for example, Lyme disease out of a deer and then drop off the deer, land in some tall grass, then you'll go walking by on a hike, brush up against it, and the tick will transfer to you and go, oh, there's a nice warm spot, and they'll burrow in and they'll start biting on you. A couple ways to prevent that as far as individual protection. If you're going to be walking in tall grass, make sure you're wearing long pants. For areas that are known to have problems, I would recommend making sure your shirt's tucked in, and then you're going to want to pull your socks up and over your pants. So you're going to look a little bit strange, but at that point, there's no exposed area. Your skin is going to be open or susceptible to ticks getting on it. And hopefully you'll be able to see it a little bit more often. Always do tick checks in that area to make sure that there isn't one, hiding on your sleeve or crawling up your pant leg. But if they don't have a way to get under anything, so underneath your pant leg and up under your leg, or underneath your shirt and into your stomach, then you're going to be much better off. So shirts tucked in, socks over your pants, you'll be good in that kind of situation. Mosquitoes can also carry all kinds of diseases. The easy way individually is through the use of bug spray, wearing long sleeves, making sure you're not drinking a lot of sugary drinks and things like that while you're out for long periods of time on campouts. That way you're not as attractive to those types of bugs. In a larger scale, related to mosquitoes and things like that, they like large bodies of stagnant water, right? That's where the larva grows, that's where they turn into mosquitoes, and then they go out looking for food, blood in this case. So if you have large amounts of standing water in your yard, typically in the summertime when it gets hot, that's when they like to come out and start growing. So you want to make sure that you get rid of any standing water. Now in a large scale situation, if you live in the southern U.S. or areas where swampland and things like that are very prevalent, it can be tough. So that requires a much larger scale to help mitigate or prevent any issues from the mosquitoes. And that usually involves them putting out traps to catch mosquitoes, for example, in multiple different areas, and then testing those mosquitoes to see if they're carriers for any particular diseases. Provided they're not carriers, then they're just a nuisance and an annoyance if you do get bit by them. But if they are carriers in certain areas, then they have to do what they can to get rid of that standing water or chemically kill the mosquitoes and the larvae to make sure that they're not going to hatch into any more mosquitoes and compound the problem. Kind of like what we're dealing with the COVID-19 problem right now. The more there are, the more that can possibly get infected. So the mosquito abatement companies and things like that, they're there to coin a common term heard right now, they're out there to flatten the curve. So by flattening the curve, they are flattening all the bugs to make sure that the mosquitoes are not spreading to pass on the diseases in a much larger area. We're also talking about rodents as well. Okay, rodent droppings, be it mice or rats, those are going to be bad for you. And the easiest way to keep mice away and rats is to not leave food out. Rule number one when you're on campouts. Well, there's a couple of rule number ones, but an important one is you're not going to leave food in your tent, right? You don't take food into your tents. Don't leave it out. Make sure all your trash is properly stored. So whether that be in a standard steel trash can of sorts or a steel dumpster, or if those aren't available, properly stored, in the bed of a truck or somewhere where an animal's not going to be able to get to them, so they can be disposed of at a later point once you get to that type of receptacle. Mice and rats are kind of like bears. Once they realize there's a food source there, be it trash or otherwise, they're going to set up. Shop. It's going to become their home. That's where they're going to live. That's where more mice and rats are going to come, and then the chance of diseases spreading is going to increase greatly because of that. So, properly storing food, not leaving out trash. Any food that does fall on the ground that you're picking up and putting into the trash can, to make sure that it's not out there as an attractant to bring in those types of animals. Plus, it also helps keep down on the damage to your camping gear, because mice and rats, have a tendency to like to chew through things. So if you have food inside your tent, or it's inside a backpack or a bag inside your tent, they could very well chew through your tent, chew through your bag, and now they're eating your food, and now you have holes in your gear, which make it not as pleasurable an experience to use it again at a later point in time. So help protect your gear, help protect you, throw away your food, properly store it, and as we covered in requirement 3, make sure you're drinking safe water. Okay, safe water is key, and as we've covered here, there are a couple different methods to do that. All right, if you have any questions, let me know. Either send me a message through the Google Classroom, shoot me an email, send me a text, or otherwise. And until next time, Scout on.